do business with people they like. And so building those relationships and building a community feel where people feel, hey, I need some help.
Nothing beats getting in the room together and just throwing stuff up on a whiteboard and seeing what sticks and what slowly slides off as you investigate it further.
It's one thing to be able to say, hey, we know what the issues are. It's something entirely different to be able to say, and here's what the really smart CEOs are doing about it.
Look, we've all been bombarded with it, haven't we? Chat GPT this, the robots are taking our jobs, that. It's everywhere. But while most people are just, I don't know, messing around with prompts and making AI-generated art, there's a much bigger, slightly more interesting conversation happening in the background. What actually happens when the black box gets it wrong, when a life is on the line or a company's entire fortune disappears? Today, we're digging into the guts of that, and honestly, there's nobody better to talk to us or walk us through this than my guest today is Ted Miller. Now, Ted's back. We've spoken to him before, and he's a bit of a rare breed. He's got one foot in law, one in management, both eyes fixed clearly on what's happening digitally. He's been looking at how a 100-year-old legal case about a snail and a bottle of ginger in Paisley in Scotland is suddenly the most important thing for the AI age. It's the neighbour principle for the 21st century. We're going to get into the social dividend, which is a fancy way of asking if we're all going to end up in a 4-day work week or if we're all looking at actual civil unrest. It's not too far away. Let's think about this. Plus, how researchers are using AI to catch hundreds of thousands of fake scientific papers. And a bit of a warning for all you creators out there, that masterpiece you've just generated, I wonder who actually owns it. Is AI your new best friend, a useful tool, or just a massive legal liability waiting to explode? Ted's here to give us that roadmap for the next 5 years, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this one. Welcome back, Ted. It's really good to see you again.
Great to see you, Graham. Hope you're refreshed after your non-break over the holidays.
No break whatsoever, lots of travel, but hey, it's always fun. It's fun. That's the good thing. I think every time I see you, I keep on saying this is a long time in coming. We have been planning this one for a while. And I even looked at my previous notes on it, and it's changed even since we were going to do this just a few months ago. I mean, today's topic is AI and the law, emerging management issues. Kind of what does it mean when AI is becoming more and more regularly used on a daily basis? And especially within law and the legal side. Now, just the first question I've got to ask is, what makes AI different from any previous waves of technology automation when it comes to kind of legal responsibility?
I think the one thing that I would point to is the sheer pace of it, the pace of change which is occurring. And it's also the scale of it, the potential scale of it, at least anyway. And you can see this reflected in, we just had the World Economic Forum in January in Davos. And one of the headline issues was the effect of AI, particularly in relation to employment, job shedding, and the like. And if you follow the debate that happened at the World Economic Forum, they sort of fall into 4 camps with this, because they know, the big tech guys, the heads of the huge corporations, they know that this has the potential to create, not to put too fine a point on it, civil unrest if it's not managed properly. We had the CEO, Jamie Dimon, of the world's biggest bank, JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase has annual revenues that exceed the gross domestic product of Australia. So it is the world's biggest bank. He's got about 300,000 employees, and commenting on the potential job shedding that AI could bring about, I'm calling Mr. Dimon a realist. His point was twofold. One, I'm not shedding any jobs. I'm going to retrain them. I'm going to relocate them. And I'm going to provide income support so they can transition into another part of the labour market. Because if we just go across the board shedding jobs and not paying attention to the social effects, his words, not mine, we risk serious civil unrest. Elon Musk then jumps in, and I'm going to call Elon the optimist or even the utopian visionary. But he was joined in by Bill Gates on this, and also by Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. Elon's position is that within a couple of decades, work might actually become optional. It may well have that much of an effect upon how we produce the things, the goods, the services that we need on a daily basis. But all three of those gentlemen were on a unity ticket when they said that we have to start seriously looking at options like universal basic income. Elon described it as universal high income. The British Chancellor is currently looking at options for that. They're working up a paper on that in order to deal with the potential effects of AI. I'd put it this way, just one way of understanding the potential scale of the issue. It wasn't that long ago that we saw massive street protests in all large Western cities when you had gatherings of the Group of Five or the OECD or the World Economic Forum. And there's no doubt that radical left activists, who do actually have a useful role to play in the world, and I don't want to deprecate their efforts entirely, but I can just see them jumping all over this one. And one of the new axes of, as it were, protest will be human values versus a dystopian AI future. And you can certainly imagine that could be pretty easily worked up. So that's just a measure of the scale that I think this technology and the speed with which it might come on. A little bit hard to predict at the moment, but it does seem to be scaling up very quickly. So its scale and speed, I think, are the two defining features which make it different. And it's a developing story. Things are changing every week.
It's interesting. Jamie, is it Demon?
Demon, yeah.
Demon. It's quite interesting. Almost the ultimate capitalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And he made I've just quickly had a kind of a look for it there. He made a statement. I've not got a full statement there, but I'll give it the gist of it just a few months ago, talking about now they've been very much all results driven, very high D if we looked at the disc and behavioral style. Just don't matter how we get there, just get there. And that's how he's into the position he's in. Talking about going forward, the empathy, emotional intelligence, leading with the heart will be the most important thing for anybody coming into the workplace over the next few years. We actually did a stop and double take that it was actually him that had said it.
Yeah.
And it seems such a movement away that he's now beginning to talk about the human element.
Absolutely. It's absolutely necessary. And as a point in social history, again, just as a rough sketch, Western liberal market economies obviously had to deal with, I'll call it the threat from Marxist revolutionaries in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and the response was the welfare state. After World War II, we've had a couple of waves of industrialization, deindustrialization, the introduction of computerization to begin with, and governments have always had to come up with programs to retrain people, relocate people, deal with mass job losses because of deindustrialization. Here in Australia, the city of Newcastle, 150 kilometres north of here, lost its steel factory, 12,000 jobs lost overnight. So there was a huge government effort to try and ameliorate the effects of that. What we're seeing is a rerun of this version 3, and they all know it, and they can all see the potential scale. So they are all seriously talking about a general social dividend that has to come from this. And if we're looking at Elon's statements, and Elon's net wealth is almost the GDP of Australia, so I'm going to pay him a certain amount of respect for his technological savvy, his visionary insights. If he's talking about work becoming optional in a couple of decades, and I'm pretty sure that's utopian overreach, but one of the first steps might well be to have an economy-wide rule that everybody gets a 4-day week. That's how we got the 40-hour week to begin with. We changed our employment law. We said if you want to employ somebody on a full-time contract, they can't work any more than 40 hours a week. If you're going to ask them to work more than that, you have to pay them overtime. So get out there and sort your workflow out and manage your staff so they can have a 40 or 38-hour week, actually it is now in this country. And I don't see any reason why we couldn't generally get to a 4-day week certainly in the West. We could do that. Wouldn't be that hard to organise. But one thing that would do would spread the benefit the social dividend, which is clearly there in the offing, beyond the knowledge industries where it's going to have the most immediate impact, and spread it across the society generally, just on the basis of simple fairness and equity. So we live in interesting times, and I think those sorts of policies are going to be looked at very, very seriously. And it's very interesting at the very top end of the corporate world, the banking sector, but also the AI, the tech bros themselves are actually advancing this agenda, and I like it, I have to say.
You like it?
I do, yeah. I like
Aye.
that they're taking the social responsibility issue seriously, and they're not having to have it forced upon them. But these guys, I think, are just too clever to not realise that the social issues will have to be front and centre for how this technology unfolds and the impact that it's going to have on the social order, the political order in the decade or so to come. And may as well get out in front of the curve.
I do want to get into kind of what it means on a daily basis, but just a couple of things that you've mentioned there is I do wonder if we've now got this social conscious because of the type of jobs that are changing. So when it was coal and steel job, I mean, I'm talking from a point of somebody who was directly impacted when the coal mines, etc., through family members were closed down, and there was that change from industrial. But now we seem to be going to kind of very high paid, technical, highly skilled, academically highly skilled jobs. But there seems to be a different approach to it.
If I could address that question this way, if you look at, let's just take the economy of the United States, the proportion of service jobs and highly skilled jobs, jobs in the knowledge sector, etc., as opposed to traditional manufacturing. Obviously, there was a great shift away from the emphasis on manufacturing as a proportion of the American economy. You can date it from the late 90s through to the current day. Globalization occurred, manufacturing was sent off to countries where, quote, there was a comparative advantage. We're now seeing a swing back against that in a fairly big way. And this is partly the reason for the tariff politics of the President Donald Trump, etc. So there will be a rebalancing there, I think. But the other thing that's happened politically is that, as it were, blue-collar working class constituencies are no longer necessarily captive to social democratic politics. You find a lot of that demographic are now voting centre-right as well. So there's been a real mix-up in the politics, and that's a healthy thing from my point of view, because the question of whether we pay serious attention to the welfare of the workers, of the people that get out there every day and do what's necessary to keep society up and running, is now a common issue for both sides of politics. And I think with a common degree of urgency. I mean, we can't forget that in the early 20th century, it was a very conservative politician, Churchill, and the Social Democrats in the British Parliament that got together, and they couldn't agree on much else, but they could agree on the need to introduce a welfare state, because Churchill would do a tour around Manchester and other cities like that and say, look, we just can't keep treating people like this. And that was when the modern welfare state was introduced. So those guys saw it back then, and I'm happy to think that it's genuine, that these captains of industry and the people that are leading the industry that's driving this change, they can both see it, and it looks healthy to me. I think they're genuine in what they're saying.
I should just clarify that blue collar jobs are highly skilled as well. That was the kind
of
we just kind of see at a different level, a slightly different level. But Ted, we could go into this all day. I know you could probably go into this all day about why people vote the way they do when they come from a kind of the background. I'm curious now just about when we say that AI is going to have a big issue on management issues. And it's going to impact kind of the legal part, which is fundamental to every single business.
It is, yeah.
How do you see that playing out?
I can see it in two ways. One is the employment issue. So the job shedding issue is going to be something that businesses will have to manage. And this is where you get, there's some hint that with the way some of the large corporations are handling this, they're trying to be a bit coy. Let me cut to the chase this way. From an employment law perspective, if I'm the CEO of Westpac And I've been told by my under managers that because of AI, we don't need 8,000 back office rooms, back office jobs anymore. If I'm to be honest and upfront about it and offer them redundancy packages, I have to explain the reason for the redundancy.
Yep.
Therefore, I will have to give the explanation in terms of AI. Now, we've seen significant job shedding in the last 12 months here in Australia. Telstra, NAB, ANZ Westpac, the local Microsoft, Atlassian, and Canva. As far as I'm aware from reading the financial press, none of them have stated or hinted that this is AI driven. So maybe they're being a bit coy about it, I'm not sure. But if you're going to be dealing with staff turnover based on AI, I think you just have to be upfront about it and you have to explain it, and there have to be proper processes in place. So there's the employment law aspect, and for any business, the scale of the importance of that's obvious. It's about half of your operating budget is paying your wages. So that's a measure of in the management of any business. But also generally in the area of liability issues, particularly in the law of negligence. And there are some real emerging issues there. Let me just paint a very broad picture without going into too much legal detail. The law of negligence, the modern law of negligence, really comes from an incident that occurred in Paisley, which is just really an outlying suburb of Glasgow.
I used to live there.
You used to live
I
there?
used to live in Paisley.
Do you know Wellmeadow Street?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's used to be a little cafe called the Wellmeadow Cafe on the corner of Wellmeadow Street and the little laneway there. I can't remember the name of the lane. It was called the Wellmeadow Cafe. And in 1928, May Donoghue went along there to have a treat with her boyfriend. The boyfriend's always remained unnamed to this day. And he buys her an ice cream sundae. So this is ice cream in a bowl.
Yep.
And it's given a bottle of ginger beer that she can pour over it to make it a delightful little treat. The bottle is opaque. You can't see anything inside it. And in fact, the manufacturer was faulty or negligent, and there was a snail in there which had decomposed. And only when she poured out the last part did she realize that there was a snail in there. She got terrible gastro, trauma. She sued. Now, here's the problem. She bought the sundae from the shop owner, and there's not much point suing the Wellmeadow Cafe. They don't have any money. But she doesn't have a contract with the manufacturer, Stevenson, who's a local in Paisley. She doesn't have a contract with him because it's the cafe that has the contract. This ends up in the British House of Lords in 1932. And Lord Acton, the most famous judge on that bench, actually looked to the New Testament and the story of the Good Samaritan and said, well, hang on a minute. If you're making this ginger beer and you know that the bottle's opaque, you've got a duty to look after your neighbour. It's called the neighbour principle. And she can sue you directly whether she has a contract or not. And that's the whole basis of the modern law of negligence right there. It happened in Paisley, the Wellmeadow Cafe. If you go to Wellmeadow Street today, you'll find on one side of the street where the cafe used to be, there's a little version of the bottle of ginger beer with the snail in it. And on the other side, there's a little statue of May Donoghue there. So it's world famous. That's where it comes from.
World famous. I lived there for 2 years, and this is the first time I've ever heard that.
That's
How embarrassing is that?
And that's where it all comes from. Now, so far as AI is concerned, that then raises two issues which are becoming very important at a very, very rapid pace. So if I'm a doctor and I'm using AI, Scribe, or whatever it is to treat my patients, and I do something which is negligent, I don't use the AI properly, or I fail to exercise my own professional judgment, I don't take their blood pressure into account, I don't give enough weight to it and prescribe a drug that I shouldn't, and there's an adverse medical outcome. Potentially there's a medical negligence suit there. But also the creator of the AI product itself, on the basis of the neighbour principle in Donoghue v. Stevenson, the case that I've just tried to summarise for you, they also could be liable because if the doctor's going to be sued, you can be pretty sure that if there's any chance of holding the manufacturer of the AI product liable as well, because you could be talking a couple of $1 million here, they'll be joined as a contributory. And if there's something defective in the AI algorithm or the way it works, they could be sued, just as Stevenson was sued for the hidden snail in the ginger ale bottle under the neighbour principle in the Donahue and Stevenson case. And part of the problem there, of course, is you had this black box. The ginger beer bottle was opaque. You couldn't see the snail inside. And the AI algorithm is so complex, the user can't see the flaw in it when they're using it. Now, this has given rise to a completely new area of insurance, and it's becoming so important that the European Union is currently considering laws which will be EU-wide to make insurance for the vendors, the people selling the AI products, to make it compulsory, or they will not be able to sell AI products anymore in the European Union. The view's been taken that AI, as it's being rolled out and people are seeing the effects of it, is such critical business infrastructure that we can't allow the possibility of catastrophic insurance losses to place a potential barrier in front of the development of the technology. And so we do what we've always done. We create an insurance pool to spread the risks. And this entirely new area of insurance has just appeared within the last 6 months or so. I've become aware of it. So you've got people with these huge brains and big data, actuaries and the like, busily working away as pricing teams in actuarial companies and insurance companies to come up with how these products are going to be put into the market. But this is a very, very important area related to the law of negligence that any firms that are looking at AI will have to get across and talk to their insurance brokers about and make sure that it's covered in their policies, their business insurance policies.
There's a few things that just really jump out. I told you I did a little bit of research into this. I was really surprised to find that 1 in 4 GP surgeries are already using AI scribes of some kind.
Amazing, isn't it?
I know, yeah, I know what I thought when it gets to kind of the 1 in 4, when it gets to 25%, the next stage is going to be much quicker. Or for adults.
You would think so,
yeah. How is this different from a medical professional going on and searching online, or looking at document management systems that they've got and the document management system not highlighting a specific document or precedent or something like that? How is this different?
The substituted judgment. AI, generative AI, purports to do the analysis for you and come up with the conclusion. Whereas those technologies really just provided access to information, which you would then have to intellectually process and make a decision of your own. There's a really important issue here, like at I think quite a fundamental level. And the idea or the age-old problematic concept of truth kicks in here. Can I just give you an analogy? If you and I want to have a dispute about a complex legal issue, for any lawyer in the common law world, if you were to ask me what's the truth in relation to this complex legal issue, my response would have to be that our legal system doesn't really recognise absolute truth when it comes to the resolution of complex legal issues. So, for example, if you look at the Australian High Court, 7 best lawyers in the country, essentially, pretty much so, 60% of the time they disagree with each other. So the decision will be maybe 4-3 or 5-2. But more often than not, they do not agree. And their decisions are always written in the form of an opinion, right? Not absolute truth. US Supreme Court, the figure's almost exactly the same. 9 justices on the US Supreme Court. And more often than not, they disagree with each other. The only outlier in the common law world is the House of Lords in England. And the only reason they agree with each other more than they disagree with each other is they have a comity rule, which comes from the 16th century, which essentially says, get over your disagreements and come up with a unified decision. But most other common law jurisdictions have not adopted the British comity rule. So when you're diagnosing a patient who presents to you with a set of symptoms, you've got to form an opinion. You've got to form a considered professional judgment. And it's the displacement of the responsibility to do that AI promises. And that's where the difference comes in. I think it's a qualitative difference, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And it cuts both ways. On the one hand, if I use AI and end up doing something which and a bystander would say, an expert doctor would say that was negligent, then it's my responsibility. But on the other hand, if I don't use AI and I miss something that the AI system would have picked up for me, I'm just as likely to be held liable for that as well. Now, if I'm a professional, if I'm a doctor, if I'm a lawyer, an engineer, anybody with professional responsibilities, this is how I would look at it. I would say to myself, if I get in trouble, God forbid, and there's a question of how AI has been used in relation to that specific decision that I've made, I just remember this. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to get many court cases in which the judge is going to admit expert evidence from guys with heads this size who will unpack the algorithm for him step by step and identify, because it's a black box. You always have to think about professional decision making on the basis of what would a reasonable professional do in my situation in these circumstances, and just use AI as a tool. But the tendency to trust AI a bit too much, I think, is the qualitative difference. And it is one of the reasons why I mentioned this burgeoning insurance market. If you look at the European Union reports, and there's been some House committee discussion of this in the US House of Representatives, this is one of the key issues that they keep bringing up, because they are saying it's inevitable that there will be people out there who will use AI, overtrust it, and could cause some cataclysmic insurance losses. So we have to create the insurance pool to make sure the technology generally is protected.
There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to unpack. I mean, I've got tons of notes here. Does AI actually say, we give you the answer? Does it actually say that?
Well,
So I was going to say, so does it say that? And is that not our issue that we're using it in the wrong way?
I think it's our issue that we're using it the wrong way. And I think the theme that I'm emphasizing at the moment, maybe in 5 years' time, people say, well, we all learnt that and we moved on from it and we used AI as a tool.
Yeah.
But at the moment, you see a lot of reports, House committee reports. There's been a report in the Australian Senate on AI technology and how it needs to be regulated. Again, the British Parliament has been looking into it, European Union, and this issue keeps coming up again and again and again, that it's out there. People do tend to rely on it, over-rely on it, and they're concerned that there could be catastrophic insurance losses, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this message will definitely get out there, and the AI vendors have a huge incentive to make sure that the end users are not over-relying upon it. But again, as a technology, it is qualitatively different from just simply data extraction, compilation, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a new digital age, and there's no doubt that the key selling point to it is that in significant respects, it can emulate the intellectual functions of a human mind. That's why people are buying it. But it needs to be checked, has to be checked.
And again, it's only an opinion.
It's only an opinion. You made a good point last time we were talking. Maybe it was off air.
That would be a first. I'm going to say that'd be a first.
It did stick in my mind. Point. You made the point to me that you were using at least 2 separate AI tools.
Yeah.
And you were sort of having a conversation with both of them on the same issue. I think that's a very smart thing to do, because if you ask similar questions of different AI platforms, you are going to get somewhat different answers. So treat them as interlocutors, as useful assistants. But unfortunately, out there in the world generally, because it's such a rapid uptake with so many people using it, and imagine doctors, they're pushed for time. Professionals are pushed for time as well. And they look at it and they go, yeah, I think that's right, and over-rely upon the AI, the scribe, whatever it is they're using. And that's where the problems start to come up.
I get that completely. So I just kind of throw it. I've changed the platforms that I'm using, or the AI that I'm using now, and I'm going through quite a big thing that I'm doing a lot of research on, and I'm going so far down the line with one, taking its findings and throwing it into the other, and starting to. So sometimes I'll give exactly the same prompt and get different answers. It's quite enlightening, which makes me stop and go, right, okay, I need to really think about where I go with this. Another one's I'm getting it to check each other's work.
Yeah, yeah.
And it still hallucinates. I'll be honest, it's anecdotal, but I would say I think it's hallucinating more than it ever did.
Yeah, you'd
Oh,
make anyone hallucinate, by the way.
well, thank you. I'll take it as a compliment.
The other big area for management is definitely intellectual property,
Yeah.
because there's some real movement in that area. Copyright has been hugely affected by it. And just the general setup is copyright protects the form of the expression of ideas, not the ideas themselves. We don't want to lock up ideas, but it would protect if within 70 years of the death of Shakespeare under the current copyright law, it would protect any of his soliloquies, but it wouldn't protect the idea of a prince of Denmark who really couldn't make his mind up about what he wants to do about the death of his father, etc., etc. So you can't protect the idea. And these laws have been around for 300 odd years now. And the question with AI that is there's a lot of lawsuits that are coming up. If you have a copyright work and I use it, I'm allowed to use it on the basis of what's called fair dealing. So not overusing it or using it for research or educational purposes, or critiquing it, or creating a parody of some song like Weird Al Yankovic and all that sort of stuff, which was an awful lot of fun. But you don't have to use very much of it. Johnny Cash's song Folsom City Blues, he was sued by Chuck Berry for that, because it was basically a rip-off of a Chuck Berry song. I've got that one wrong. Beach Boys, Surfing USA's Chuck Berry, Sweet Little 16. So if you look at the credits on a Beach Boys album, and if you look at the credits on that, Chuck Berry is added as a
Wow, okay.
Yeah, because of that. The Verve, Bittersweet Symphony, and the Rolling Stones. So there's lots and lots of that. But the thing about the copyright issues is they're internationalized. Most countries in the world are signatory to an international convention called the Berne Convention. So if I infringe American copyright here in Sydney, there's mutual recognition. So an American can come here and sue me in the New South Wales Supreme Court. Or if I have my copyright infringed in the US, the American courts will allow me to go there and vindicate my copyright rights. And most countries in the world are a party to that. So the problem with AI is, can a AI system use copyright material? The large language models train on copyright material all the time. And it seems that the answer is moving towards this. If the AI language models are reading copyright material and then what they produce is truly transformative, so it doesn't really bear any resemblance to the material they've read, then there's not going to be any infringement of copyright. But again, you don't need to infringe very much to find yourself in trouble there. There's a lot of lawsuits, and the US Congress and the British Parliament have enacted laws to allow text and data mining exemptions. So there's a bigger margin for error now. You can train your large language models on the entire canon of Western literature, including literature that still has copyright. So death of the author plus 70 years, it's still subject to copyright. It's not yet public domain. In Australia, we have resisted that. The government has set its face against that. But because we're a Berne Convention country, I'm not quite sure how long we can hold out against that. And then the other issue, particularly for creative industries, media of any kind, music, film production and the like, to what extent can you use AI to create new material and still claim copyright in it? So to get copyright, you need to be a human being. That's just fundamental principles. Only human beings have legal personality, can be the person in whom writes it in here. But you can use AI to a certain extent. And the best example I could come up with is a local Australian musical outfit called Uncanny Valley. They actually operate out of a store on the waterfront in Balmain. They do music for film, television, all that sort of stuff. They're a pretty kooky bunch. When you see a picture of this ensemble of musicians, It looks like the crew out of The Big Bang Theory and Jim Morrison and the Doors together. There's all PhDs in there and etc. They won the 2020 International AI Song Contest, which is like the equivalent of the Eurovision. It's a big deal, believe it or not, by sampling kookaburras, koalas, and Tasmanian devils, and then synthesizing it into a song and putting some really bad lyrics to it. But it won, and they definitely get copyright in that because there's quite a lot of human effort goes into it. But the whole thing's then generated by artificial intelligence. So as long as you put enough work into it, and use AI as a tool, you will get copyright. On the other side of the ledger, there is a little Google site, which is a poetry site, Poem Portraits, it's called, and you can access it on Google. It's open access. And with poetry portraits, what you do, all you do, is you're allowed to take a picture of your face, and then you give it one word. So it can be an emotion like sad or despairing, or just a state of mind like sentimental or whatever, and it writes a poem for you. I tried it this morning. It's terrible.
I'm glad you said that.
But you're never, ever going to get copyright in something like that. So these are the boundaries that are being dealt with at the moment. Legislation's being changed at the moment. So any business that has any exposure to intellectual property, not only copyright, but patents, designs, all of those areas, similar principles apply. So that's.
I was actually going to. Can you just differentiate the difference between IP and copyright?
So intellectual property is the big umbrella concept, yeah. So you get property rights in the fruits of your intellectual activity. Mm-hmm. The oldest and best known example of intellectual property is copyright. So we're talking about essentially the written word. So a play, a poem, piece of literature, but it could also apply to a cartoon. You get copyright in that. Could also apply to a painting. So you can't, again, if Leonardo was still alive, you can't go putting the Mona Lisa on a T-shirt, because the idea is a woman sitting with a window open to a background behind her. That's the idea, portrait, etc. But the form of the expression is the actual painting, so that gets copyright in it. Then you have patents, which is a manner of manufacture. It's an invention for a new useful manner of manufacture. Then you have designs, so the way your furniture looks, for example, that's separate intellectual property. And of course you have trademarks as well. So they're the big four. So intellectual property is the general idea, and those are the big four areas of IP.
So I'm thinking about kind of in everyday business, if somebody's got a patent or a design, if I was to upload that into AI and say improve it and make 5 specific changes, or 3 specific changes, would that be a problem?
You might get away with it.
I'm curious about what the difference is if I just actually sat down with a piece of paper and tried to redesign it.
Yeah. One way of testing it, you go through the process, yeah? You say, I kind of like that, like, I don't know, the Lamborghini badge.
Yeah.
I like something like that, similar, that sort of has the same cultural cues and, might appeal to the same sort of market segment of consumers, yeah? So go through your process. This has been happening for centuries, by the way. People have been doing this just without the AI tool being in there. So you go through the process and then get somebody who knows nothing about what you've done, yeah, and put the Lamborghini one next to them and then show them yours and say, do you think that one looks copied from the other one? And if there's no hint of copy, it's a look and see test at the end of the day. Jeez. Everything's derived from everything else at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where, so for example, the Verve with that song, Bittersweet Symphony, I think they were well aware that it had a bit of a hook in it that sounded like the Rolling Stones song, but they thought they'd get away with it. But just the sample was enough to invoke the other songs, so they got caught out. But it's a look and feel test, and literally judges, when they decide IP cases, particularly in those areas like trademarks, designs, they'll have a look at it and go, well, I don't really see the link.
I mean, that's very close to my heart, the Verve one, because it's from Manchester.
Is it?
Because it's from Manchester. All I will say is if Vanilla Ice can get away with the sampling of Queen and David Bowie by putting in one extra note in, I'm lost with where that.
Did he get away with it, or wasn't he?
No, he got away with it.
He got away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Which is one of the most. But anyway, So we're talking about copyright. We're talking about AI being able to use information that's already there, that's been copyrighted, etc.
Yep.
And we're talking about it learning from it. If I was to upload something into Claude or Gemini today,
Yep. Mm.
if I was to kind of throw in some PDFs off a book, say, off a book, and AI's got that learned knowledge now. The LLM's got that learned knowledge. Whose responsibility is it? Is it for me for uploading it? Is it the LLM for not spotting it's copyrighted and still using it?
Mhm.
Where does
The
it stop?
the liability issue only arises at the next step when you then publish it. So if you put it into your large language model,
Mhm.
and then whatever results from the model, so the product from the LLM, if that product itself doesn't infringe the original copyright, it doesn't matter what happened in the intermediate step. Okay, you're not infringing copyright merely by reading it and looking at it and analyzing it, but it's when you publish something that actually infringes copyright. So here's the tension that creatives have with large language models, because they can see that, I mean, I have a number of published books, and many other people do as well. And, authors think to themselves, well, these large language models are feasting on our work in order to be able to produce a product for their end users. But the vendors of the large language models say, well, but everyone reads your work, and what we actually produce at the end of the day itself, that product doesn't infringe your copyright. So the intermediate step's none of your business. Governments have not accepted that argument by and large. And so there will be compensation schemes. There's already a compensation scheme up and running here in Australia to add to top up the royalty payments that authors get from the Australian government each year for use of their books. So, for example, I receive a royalty check from the Commonwealth Government, I think every June. I usually go out and have a nice dinner with it. But that's based upon people going to libraries, reading my books, maybe photocopying them if they're in a university setting, et cetera, et cetera. And they're called public lending rights or electronic lending rights. So there's going to be an extension of that to cover the internal munching of these texts by the large language models. So there's no liability for copyright infringement at that point. You've actually got to publish something that itself infringes the copyright.
Like you could almost say somebody using AI or let's get LLM, generative AI to produce a document, and I've given AI the copyrighted stuff, and you get the output because it's learned it at some point down in the future.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's still down to you to check that you're not breaching copyright if you publish that under your name. And it is even
there's
though
a real danger there, isn't there?
yeah, even though the LLM has created it and you stick it under your name, are we okay with that?
No, you're still in trouble. And this is the black box paradox again, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the black box for the doctor, did the artificial intelligence not put enough weight on the blood pressure issue? And did I overprescribe the medication? And did that cause the stroke? Yeah. Well, unpacking what happened inside the AI system is well nigh impossible for any average or even highly intelligent human being. And again, a downstream user of an LLM using it to produce a text, you don't know the thousands and thousands of copyright texts that it's been feasting itself on in order to create the tokens that allows it to predict the next sentence on whatever it is you ask it to produce. So you might be completely innocent of it, but it's no excuse in a copyright case. Can I just add, Graham, however, these copyright cases are expensive to run. So they're only ever going to come up, if there's real money involved, more or less speaking. And if users of large language models do find themselves in that position, and the copyright owner becomes aware, you'll get a notice telling you to stop doing it. So you're not going to get, the trapdoor is not going to open under you straight away. And we're also busily introducing, the Commonwealth is going to rewrite some of these laws to introduce a small claims procedure to deal with exactly those sorts of issues that you're talking about. So it's a good point, and people are already looking at some sort of remedy for that.
I've got a couple of points, a couple of questions about this, just to kind of finish off that part. There was a few weeks ago, I was trying to grab some information, and I said, I thought I'd just test it. I thought I'd test what I thought I'd chance my arm. And I said, can you give me copies of what this company produces.
Yeah.
And Gemini came back and basically said, how dare you ask us to do that? That's unethical. So it reprimanded me. I was just asking. I was just asking. So it quite genuinely said, we may have this within our system. It would be unethical for us to share it. So
You've been reproached.
Yeah. There we go. So if I'm, I've spent this evening, had a couple of glasses of wine, done a really nice prompt, all of a sudden the LLM has produced a 10,000 word book for me, a novel.
Mm.
Who owns it? Who owns the copyright? Me. Well, it's got to be me because you said you've got to be human.
So it depends on how much input you had. And remember, the copyright's going to protect the form of the expression of the idea. So if you've merely said to whatever your AI platform is, I want a book about love lost set in 1940s Sydney, where the protagonist goes off to war and dies, and the heroic woman marries his brother. And
you're good at this.
Yeah,
I'm copying that prompt.
There we go. But if that's all you do, and then it turns out a prize-winning novel for you, between you and I'd keep the fact that you didn't do anything more than that to yourself, because technically you shouldn't get copyright in it, because the form of the expression of the idea has been created by the system and not by you. So on basic principles, you shouldn't get copyright in that. And I don't think there's any chance of that aspect of the law of copyright being changed, because it's there fundamentally to reward the intellectual efforts of a biological human being. And
Yeah.
I don't see, and that's already been really strongly looked at by the various legislatures I've already mentioned, and they've all pulled the shutter down very hard on that. No, we're not going to go to that step.
So you couldn't argue that it was my combination of scenarios, 1940s Sydney off to war, that actually created that. Interesting.
Yeah, I'd get it to produce a draft and then do some editing on it, yeah. And then you've got a version of it, yeah.
We can take out the little dashes.
You can take out the little dash. But do some work on it, Graham, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure it'll be a masterpiece.
I'm feeling it already. I read somewhere that AI is already beginning to invent new drugs.
New drugs?
If we don't, do we get patents for that then? Is that allowed? So if they're taking it from scratch, because that feels like a big area.
You would be able to. My view on it, and I think this is an orthodox view. If I use AI to help me, so the creation of a new drug is going to be a very highly technical, biomedical, etc., undertaking with a lot of specialized knowledge involved. I would have thought that the inputs into the AI platform, in order for it to go on and then come up with an answer for you, this is the type of molecule you need, this is the medium in which it has to be vectored and all that sort of stuff. And then you have to go through a period of maybe 10 years of clinical testing and all that sort of stuff before therapeutic goods would approve it and go into the market. So I'm pretty sure you'd be able to get patent protection, and you would call it a method of manufacture. And I don't really think it matters too much how you come up with the method of manufacture or manner of manufacture is the other version of the language there, because there's a certain ingenuity in that. And patent law has a real bias, and it always has had a real bias towards, if somebody comes up with something that's really useful for society, then the law is going to protect it. So the principles aren't different, but the emphasis on the utility of the invention can become a very, very persuasive element in a patent application. And then when you apply for your patent, what you have to put forward for registration is what's called a description of the invention. So if the AI helped come up with the new drug, it doesn't really matter, in the sense that you would then document it, and then you would set out the steps for how this drug is to be manufactured, etc., and that's what you're going to get the patent on, the manner of the manufacture of that drug. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that would work fine, and patent law policy would encourage pharmaceutical companies and research companies to work in that way. So I don't think there'd be any disincentive for pharmaceutical companies to work like that.
Just looking at some of the areas, criminal justice that's been used, maybe not so much in Australia, but it certainly is in many other areas, kind of predict crime and predict and beginning to profile people.
I'm very wary of all that stuff.
This, which again, for somebody like I get it's a surprise and employment in the workplace. I mean, we almost allow it to happen where AI is, the gig economy is still thriving and huge, and that's always and it has been AI driven. How they allocate jobs, who gets it, there's surge pricing, all this type of stuff.
Dynamic pricing for your
Yeah.
Uber, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Healthcare, financial services. I mean, one of the things I've taken in from today is you can't rely on AI and you can't not use it.
Yep. You have to figure out how to use it properly.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, AI being used in the criminal justice system, I have some real boundaries when it comes to large-scale AI applications that clearly can have a direct impact on human welfare. And in around about 2015, our national government, the Commonwealth government, some boffin gave a report to the Minister for Social Security and said, look, we think there are about 300,000 overpayments made every year. It's about $1.8 billion in revenue going down the drain. And we've got our clerks looking at sending out debt notices, but we've done an analysis on this. And once you do 20,000 of these evaluations every year, to scale it up to get it to 50,000 is going to cost an enormous amount of money. So in order to even make it break even, we can't push it beyond 25,000. So what we'd like to do is computerize it and send out these debt notices based on an algorithm running in a large computer, matching income statements from the tax department and the various welfare agencies. And it became known as Robodebt. It was an absolute calamity and a disaster. We had people committing suicide. We had people traumatized, and we're talking about thousands of people. We're talking about, at the end of the day, I think they had to withdraw about 300,000 of these flawed debt notices. I think the Commonwealth ended up being in debt it cost about $6 billion to clean this up. We had to have a royal commission into it. So large insurance companies, banks, when you're dealing with large amounts of people and you're dealing with sensitive information and sensitive issues like indebtedness, this is, I think, a salutary tale for you. There is a 3-part docudrama. It's a docudrama, so they do put a little bit of seafood sauce on it here and there, and why not? That ran on SBS, and you can still see it, which is our special broadcasting service, and it's still available to see online. 3-part series, The People v. Robodebt. And I just think that's a really salutary lesson that we need to learn and be very, very careful about scaling up AI, dealing directly with people's personal interests. I don't want to see it introduced to any significant extent in the criminal justice system.
Okay.
Predictive policing and all that sort of stuff. It's going to be based on stereotypes. You're going to end up discriminating against groups of people on no basis whatsoever. So no, I'm very wary of all that.
I mean, the post office scandal wasn't quite the same in the UK. But again, it was an incorrect algorithm, a faulty kind of software system.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting in those we gave, this is what the system said. It must be right. You must have done wrong.
Yeah.
Because this is the calculation it's coming up with.
And there's a great documentary about that as well.
There is. Very good.
But the human trauma that came about as a result of that. And then you have this problem. You have big government. You will never get government to admit a mistake of that kind, short of some sort of monumental effort and some political change, like a change of government, for example, where the incoming government, and I don't want to sound too cynical, but can see some political advantage in championing the issue, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. It's very, very difficult to deal with those sorts of issues, and most issues of that kind, thankfully, are of a small scale, but nothing ever comes to them. They go to ombudsman writes a report, it goes in the bin. So I'd be really, really wary about rolling out AI in any of those areas. Medical science and science in general, because it has such medical science research, because it has such an impact upon medical services that we have come to expect, and we should be all very grateful for. But it's seeing some real problems. But I think there's a good news story here, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
God, right, hold on. We need to be able to clip this.
We
So
need to
go
clip this up.
again.
Yeah,
So what have you got, Ted?
yeah, I have some good news for you.
Nice.
Yeah, here we go. So on the one hand, if you were to, just to get a taste of this, there's the German physicist, science commentator Sabine Hossenfelder, who did a nice presentation on this. It's all available online, not that long ago, about how fake science papers are being produced by AI. And this is, really having a serious impact on scientific research. And so I had a look into it. There was an article published in the Australian newspaper only a few days ago about fake medical science research. And one of our own universities here in Australia, Queensland University of Technology, God love them, they created an AI bot that could do the reverse. So go back and look at these papers published in Medical Science Review and bust them for being false papers. So they did it. They picked 500,000 papers in cancer medicine research. And of the 500,000, they found 178,000 were false. Now, that's a huge number. A lot of these papers are coming from countries where, and I don't want to be too unkind, but you might assume the governments there don't have quite the same level of concern about integrity of scientific research. And I don't want to push the point too hard, and I won't even read you the list of countries. You can probably guess who they were. But setting aside the dodgy material coming from slightly dodgy countries, 4 of the largest science publishers in the world, so companies like Elsevier, which is the Dutch company, publishes The Lancet. It's got revenues of $5 billion a year. Oxford University Press, 1.5 billion a year. Springer Nature, John Wiley and Sons.
Yep.
Together, they accounted for 120,000 of the 180,000 dodgy cancer research papers. Now, to their credit, they've gone flat out to withdraw all of this material. But if you think about the weight of misinformation that represents in this crucial area of health research, that's really concerning. And this problem replicates itself across all of the key scientific disciplines. But here's the good news. Queensland University of Technology, and they've made this paper open access, and I just read it. Can we see that?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
And it's pretty sophisticated. We're talking about really quite smart people here. But they've come up with an AI bot. So they feed the papers in, and the AI bot busts the papers. Yeah. So here's the future for this. Crucial, the social utility of medical science research. We don't have to overstate it. Everyone knows what it is. So here's the answer. If you're writing an article that you want to put in a peer-reviewed journal, the first thing that the peer-reviewed journal does is to send it off to one of these AI bots. And if it flags it as suspect, it sends it back to you in confidence and says, here are the questions we've got. Fix it up, answer the questions, or withdraw the paper. Only if it gets through a filter like that does it go into the peer review system, because the peer review system is crucial. We can't have it overloaded with crap science papers published out of these paper mills, which are just fraudulent setups, produce fake term papers for university students and papers for academics who can't be bothered doing the work, but they want to be promoted to a professorship, so they pay $1,000 to get added to one of these fake papers. So I think that's a good news story. And it's an example of AI being used to round up the fraudulent misuse of itself. And you see quite a bit of this in the literature now. So there's a bit of light at the end.
And my guess is there was always fraudulent papers, but
Always
a
fraudulent
kind of
papers.
35% is pretty frightening. So anything that can reduce that, even from the original numbers, is excellent.
So there's partly the observer effect. So we started looking for this, the worldwide scientific community started looking into this issue in 2010, and it was at a certain level. And then about 2011, 12, it went off exponentially, and no one quite knows why it jumped up so high. And there's been a real fight against this ever since. How do we get this under control? And again, I won't go into the particular countries. There's no need to do that. But there are ways of getting these papers into peer-reviewed journals, roundabout ways of doing it, so on and so forth. And it is a big business, and they set up their own supposed journals and institutes, and it's incredibly and ridiculously sophisticated just to make money out of intellectually false work that they know is intellectually false. But I think that's a good news story. I read the detail of the paper that I just showed you, and I mean, I don't really know enough about this stuff, but I know a fair bit about it. I think it'd be pretty hard to get a dodgy paper passed. Sort of checking, I have to say. I wouldn't like your chances.
It's like, I'll go back just to finish off. I'll go back to something you mentioned earlier. You made a statement around the point of maybe in 5 years' time, we'll be kind of looking back on this and have learned the lesson of see the mistakes that have happened or how it's been used and know how to really use it, because it does feel that we're misjudging what an LLM is and how we should be using it. What do you think is going to be if you were to give a guess? Where do you think and how do you think we would be using this in 5 years' time? What will be the difference?
I think one of the things that's going to happen, and to me, the obvious thing that's going to happen, you brought up the issue. If I feed material into an LLM that's copyright material and it then produces something, where are the liability issues? And I think some of them already have this. So if you feed copyright material into the LLM and it spits something out, it will also give you a report as to whether it can see any potential infringements of copyright in the final product. So self-checking function in the end product. And also with the medical AI, I think the legal one is more of a problem, and the questions of making legal judgments are much more intractable because it's not a hard science, and you're talking about really sophisticated, nuanced questions of judgment about facts and almost philosophical level manipulation of legal concepts. So I think the legal one is sort of a case on its own. But for the medical and other hard sciences, these self-checking components to the AI systems, I think, will become pretty standard and will allow a bit more reliance. But I also think that the users are going to mature in the way they approach this technology. I'm pretty optimistic about it, to be honest with you. I think it's tracking okay. Yeah.
Will we all have a universal basic income or universal high income?
I don't think so. I don't like the idea of a society in which no one works. I mean, if you've ever spent time in a hippie town, it's fun.
Way before my time. way before my time.
Someone's got the photographs on. It's a curiosity for about an hour, but and God love them, but I don't really want to sit around smoking pot all day.
I can just imagine that how terrified people will be for the Australian property market if that was to come into fruition.
Yeah.
I could genuinely there are so many tangents that we always go off on when we're talking, and because it's so interesting, and I genuinely think we could have filled an hour with about 5 different topics there. Thank you again. No doubt we're going to catch up again, and I think that even revisiting this in a few months' time, we'll see some other insights. Take care.
Good to see you.
See you soon. Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.